Thank you, Braden, for that introduction. And hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lindsay Grant, and I'm the new Rolph-Bell Archivist at Trinity College. I started in this role in September of this year, but I've been working at the Trinity Archive since February 2024 when I came here on a contract. Before coming to Trin, I was an assistant media archivist at Media Commons Archives at Robarts Library. I have an undergraduate degree in history from U of T, as well as a Master of Information from the iSchool. Now, my undergraduate college was Vic, but I have something of a family connection to Trinity as I'm married to a Trin alum. And of course, I've come to know Trinity thanks in no small part to Sylvia Lassam, the previous Rolph-Bell archivist. I've benefited greatly from her deep institutional knowledge of all things Trinity, and it's my pleasure and privilege to share some of this knowledge with you today as we talk about some of Trinity's enduring gifts. No story about Trinity is complete without first acknowledging the gifts that made it possible. The college was founded in 1851 by John Strawn, and his vision of the school was brought to life through a remarkable gift of £25,000 raised from the community Strawn served and worked with. The land for the college grounds was another gift, the funds for this coming from the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel and the Society for the Promotion of Christian Knowledge. The original college was designed by Kivas Tully, and it opened its doors to students in 1852. The college continued to expand over the next few decades thanks to outpourings of generosity. Donations from the Henderson family enabled the additions of a convocation hall and chapel, both designed by Frank Darling in 1877 and 1884, respectively, and a subscription drive undertaken by the Reverend R. H. Starr in 1885 meant that Trinity could expand its faculty and academic offerings, ensuring the college's continued success through the late 19th century. The 20th century brought many changes to Trinity, and once again, gifts played a central role. In 1904, Trinity federated with the University of Toronto, a partnership that opened new possibilities. Plans got underway to move Trinity to Queen's Park, and in 1909, the Board of Governors of the University of Toronto came through with a very generous offer: a plot of land on the north side of Hoskin Avenue for Trinity, and another for St. Hilda's College on the west side of Devonshire. These plots were to come free of rent, taxes, and all other charges, provided Trinity remained federated with the university. It was an opportunity, but it came with a challenge. Trinity had to relocate within 5 years. Luckily, Trinity happened to be in the gifted hands of some very notable financial managers. Chief amongst them was Sir Henry Pellet, railroad baron and builder of Casa Loma, who had become a member of corporation in 1900. And in 1905, Pellet became Trinity's honorary treasurer, offering to guarantee the college against deficits. In 1913, Pellet was also part of the group who commissioned the architectural firm of Darling and Pearson to create an ambitious plan for the new college on Queen's Park, with that original vision shown here. Unfortunately, this was a gift that was not to be. The coming of the First World War and the declining fortunes of many of Trinity's most notable patrons, Pellet amongst them, caused a delay in construction and a significant scaling back of the original plans. As we know, when Trinity College opened in Queen's Park in 1925, there was no quadrangle, no chapel, no dining hall, and no residence wings. Only the south facade had been constructed. The building, which preserved some of the familiar characteristics of the original Trinity College, was Frank Darling's last, and one he never got to see finished, as he died in 1923. It was the endpoint of a career as well as a long relocation project, but it was also an exciting new beginning, and a new benefactor was waiting in the wings who would shape Trinity on Hoskin for the next several decades. I'm speaking, of course, of Gerald Larkin, who joined the corporation of Trinity College in 1920. Larkin was president of the Salada Tea Company, and under his management, that company grew to be the third largest supplier of teas in the world. His business acumen was rivaled only by his exquisite taste. He was an admirer of the British arts and crafts movement, but he was drawn to contemporary design as well. He was a collector, a connoisseur, and a patron to many artists. He was also extraordinarily generous to Trinity College, funding most of its major building projects in the 1940s and 1950s. These projects began with the construction of Strawn Hall, as well as the men's residence wings on the east and west sides of the building in 1941. At this time, the beloved JCR and SCR were also added to the college. The project was undertaken by the architectural firm of George and Morehouse. Larkin also financed the construction of the Trinity College Chapel, the cornerstone of which was laid in 1953. The architect for the chapel was Sir Giles Gilbert Scott, who had also designed the Liverpool Cathedral and those iconic British red telephone boxes. This was Scott's last commission and one of the last Gothic revival buildings constructed in Canada. The chapel was completed and consecrated in 1955, 70 years ago this year. Of all the Larkin projects, I think this is the one that most captured his attention and his dedication to craftsmanship and artistry. The chapel features works from many talented artists, including Emmanuel Hahn, Jacobine Jones, and A. Scott Carter. It's a remarkable space, and it's just one part of Larkin's tangible legacy at Trinity. After Gerald Larkin died in 1961, he left the college $6 million, which was the largest bequest in the college's history. That bequest would go on to fund construction of the Larkin Building. Larkin can be seen as well on the college's north residence wing, which was completed by architects Somerville, McMurridge, and Oxley in 1962, thereby enclosing the college quadrangle. A hound from Larkin's crest sits above one of the wing's dormers, one last way to remember his generosity and his realization of the vision that started with Frank Darling. When we talk about Trinity at Hoskin, we talk about generosity, about gifts. And while we'll touch on Larkin's legacy, today I want to share other gifts, smaller in scale but equally meaningful, that have shaped Trinity over the past century. With this year marking two Trinity milestones, 100 years at 6 Hoskin Avenue and 70 years of the chapel, I've been thinking a lot about anniversaries, which brought me to traditional gift guides. You know the ones, paper for the first anniversary, silver for the 25th, gold for the 50th. Each item on the list tells a story of a relationship built over time. Today, each item we'll explore is a gift given to Trinity in the last 100 years, some grand, some humble, but all deeply meaningful. So, without further ado, let's start opening our gifts. Traditionally, first anniversaries are marked with gifts of paper. One common interpretation is that paper represents a blank slate, a fresh start ready to be filled with new experiences and achievements. As an archivist, I couldn't resist beginning with paper. The written word, the historical record, these are extraordinary gifts, and I feel privileged to work with them every day. The archives hold many remarkable papers, but today I want to highlight one collection that takes us back to our own fresh start and the earliest days of Trinity at Queen's Park, the Diaries of Richard T. Halleck. Richard Treadwell Halleck was born in 1906 in Passaic, New Jersey. He attended Trinity College from 1924 to 1928, earning a BA in Oriental Languages. During his time at Trinity, Halleck was head of his year, assisted at the Trinity Library, and edited the Trinity Review. Halleck went on to study Assyriology at the University of Chicago, receiving an MA in 1931 and a PhD in 1934. Halleck is also well known in intelligence circles. During the Second World War, Halleck was a second lieutenant in military intelligence, working on cryptography, and he played an essential role in decrypting Soviet messages in what came to be known as the Venona Project. It was Halleck who discovered that the Soviets were reusing pages of some of the one-time pads they relied upon to encrypt their messages. He and his colleagues went on to break into a significant amount of Soviet traffic. After the war, Halleck returned to academia in the University of Chicago until 1971. He died in Chicago in 1980. But before his illustrious career, Halleck was a humble student. When he entered Trinity College, it was 1924, and he was amongst the last to live at the Queen Street campus. In 1925, he was amongst the first Trinity students to live at Queen's Park. Halleck lived in Trinity House, the men's residence at the corner of St. George and Harvard, and it was here in 1927 that he started keeping diaries to capture what he felt was a momentous era. In an explanatory note to his diary, Halleck writes, "I found myself in a euphoric condition and felt there should be a record of it." Originally handwritten in a series of notebooks, Halleck painstakingly retyped his diaries in 1978, faithfully recreating every detail, even spelling mistakes. He donated the typed manuscript to the Trinity College Archives in 1978. In his diary, Halleck writes at length about the kinds of things that students today might find familiar. He never gets enough sleep. He laments his loafing and his neglect of personal hygiene. He often skips his morning shave. He refers euphemistically to evenings of drinking and carousing. He works on the Trinity Review, and occasionally he feels jealous of his colleagues there. He struggles through his homework. He pines for a girl back home. He writes about feeling lonely. In all this mundane, everyday detail, there's a sense of recognition that builds. I've had that kind of day. I know that feeling so well. And if Halleck could survive the sleep deprivation and the general indignities of student life, maybe we can too. We actually know that this is a big reason that Halleck gave his diaries to Trinity. Correspondence in the archive shows that Halleck subscribed to the Convocation Bulletin. An article about college history inspired him to reach out to the college archivist at the time, Henri Pilon. Halleck felt somewhat disconnected from his fellow alumni, and when he sent his diaries, he urged Pilon to write more stories about former students and share their recollections of life at Trinity. He believed these memories would help alumni feel a deeper connection to their alma mater and to each other. Halleck gave us his memories and asked us to share them. His diaries are a reminder that the student experience, for all its highs and lows, is something we can share across generations, and I think that sense of connection is a really wonderful gift. From Halleck's sparkling observations, we turn to other things that truly shine. According to modern gift guides, crystal or glass can be given for a third anniversary, and this symbolizes clarity, transparency, and a bright future ahead. Today, I take it as an opportunity to talk about a gift of glass from Gerald Larkin, the stained glass windows in Strawn Hall. It's hard to imagine a time when Strawn Hall's east-facing windows were unadorned, but this was indeed the case when it opened in 1941. It wasn't until 1947 that Gerald Larkin commissioned the Yvonne Williams Studio in Toronto to make the first of 5 stained glass windows for Strawn Hall. The job fell to a young stained glass artist by the name of Ellen Simon, whose papers we have here in the archive, along with her original designs for the Strawn stained glass windows. Simon was born in 1916 in Toronto, Ontario. She was educated at Jarvis Collegiate Institute, the Ontario College of Art, and the Art Students League in New York. Simon began an apprenticeship at Yvonne Williams Stained Glass Studio in Toronto in 1941 and continued to work there until 1978. From Simon's papers, we know that Larkin asked for the theme of a knight in shining armor as the subject of the Strawn Hall windows. But Simon, being a pacifist, didn't want to see 5 soldiers in the space. Instead, she designed a window featuring Walter von der Vogelweide, a love poet who was also a knight. This, she felt, left her free to design 5 more poets for the space. Larkin must have liked Simon's interpretation of the brief, because this window was approved and installed in 1951. Simon went on to design 2 more of her poets. First, King David, who is shown choosing between his harp and his sword, in conflict with his 2 natures. This window was finished in 1952. Next, Simon designed a window for William Shakespeare. The skull in his hand is not poor Yorick, as Simon writes. Rather, it represents human depths. This window was made from 1953 to 1954. In addition to Simon's design work, these windows were brought to life with painting by Yvonne Williams and glazing by George London. The materials used were English, French, and German hand-blown glass, made by fusing mineral color in a melting pot with glass, which was then blown into sheets and slabs of varying hues and depths. Seen from Strawn Hall, these windows capture a magical interplay between light and shadow. Of all the details in a grand room, I think they're my favorite. And they're a wonderful example of Larkin's generosity, placed into the hands of an artist who made his vision entirely her own. But it's a vision that was never fully realized. If you visited Strawn Hall, you know there are two empty windows, which had been prepared for Simon's final two designs, Petrarch and Sophocles. The temporary glass and text portions were installed here in 1955. From Simon's papers, we know what happened. Gerald Larkin lost focus on the stained glass windows as he became more preoccupied with the chapel. Thus, Simon was never able to carry out these works. But we have her intended designs for these windows here in the archives. Here, her Sophocles is shown working out his own destiny, while Petrarch is depicted as a mountain climber. In her papers, Simon expressed a wish that her plan would one day be completed. While she passed away in 2011, her plan was briefly revived a few years ago with a group of students promising the funding. But plans were again dropped due to counterproposals that would have compromised Simon's original vision. Still, one wonders what could be. The windows that we have are a real gift, beautiful and enduring, but there's a part of that gift that's just a dream on paper. Maybe one day these figures will catch the light as the others do. Moving on from the brilliance of glass to the warmth of wood, the traditional gift for a fifth anniversary. Wood speaks of strength and endurance, and there's one wooden piece given to Trinity that, to me, perfectly symbolizes those qualities. In particular, the enduring bonds of friendship, even with friends long gone. 50 years after graduating, the class of 44 set out to give Trinity a gift that was practical but also symbolic. This was a class that was both admitted and graduated during the Second World War. This was a class that had lived through the Normandy landings of June 1944, and they had lost many of their classmates in that battle. They wanted their gift to be a tribute to their fallen friends, and in consultation with the Office of Convocation and the Bursar's Office, the 44 Reunion Committee settled on the idea of a new altar for the Trinity College Chapel. From records in the archives, it's clear the committee took enormous care in this process. The committee knew that the chapel was the heart of the college, and the altar a point of focus that would need to live up to its impressive architectural surroundings. Along with the head of college, the dean of divinity, and the chaplain, the committee decided to hold a limited competition of artists and craftspeople to submit designs for an altar made of wood. 23 design submissions were received, many of which are still preserved in the archives in the form of sketches and maquettes. And after a lot of consideration, a winner was chosen. This is the winning design created by Gordon Peterin, a Toronto artist and professor at OCAD. His design is an altar of quarter-sawn oak with 6 cast bronze panels. It has a vesica shape which echoes the arches of the chapel without being too literal. Carved into the altar are lines from High Flight, a World War II poem by John Gillespie Magee, Jr., reading, "Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings." It's a piece that's rich in symbolism, with unexpected forms not traditionally found in religious art. Peterin's altar features hearts, stars, birds, and shells. One panel on the front includes an actual rock from the Canadian Shield. Another panel on the back shows a sword plunged into the earth, calling to mind wartime cemeteries and sacrifice. It's a fitting tribute, and in the committee's words, fully worthy of the space. The altar was dedicated on April 19, 1995, by the Bishop of Toronto, with prayers of thanksgiving to honor Trinity men and St. Hilda's women who had served and sacrificed during World War II. What makes this gift so fitting for the chapel is not only its purpose, but the care behind its creation. The committee and the artist worked deliberately to ensure that this altar would be more than a functional piece. It would be a true work of art and a memorial. That attention to detail echoes the spirit in which the chapel itself was conceived in the 1950s, a space where every element was thoughtfully chosen to embody beauty, meaning, and devotion. More than wood and bronze, it's a gift that carries stories of courage, of devotion, and the enduring friendships forged at Trinity. From the warmth of wood, we now turn to steel, the traditional gift for 11th anniversaries, and a material that speaks of strength, durability, and resilience. Today, I talk about a strong and durable relationship, that of the Henderson family to Trinity College, and the Henderson sword, an artifact that recently found new life in the Trinity College archives. Now, we all know Henderson Tower, pictured here, named for a family of generous donors to Trinity, but are perhaps less familiar with the Henderson family's contributions to the college over the past 150 years. I mentioned briefly that the Henderson family funded expansion projects at Old Trinity. These gifts were received from James and Elms Henderson, both Trinity graduates. James was born in 1839 and earned his BA from Trinity in 1858. His portrait on the right was painted by Sir Edmund Wiley Greer, and it hangs in Seeley Hall. Elms was born in 1941 and earned his BA from Trinity in 1861. And as a young boy, Elms was present at the cornerstone laying ceremony of Old Trin in 1851, carrying a banner from St. Paul's Church Grammar School to the site of Old Trin. Elms is pictured here presenting the banner to the college in 1931. This banner and photo are both preserved in the archives. Both James and Elms were successful barristers, and both became members of Trinity's corporation. When James Henderson died in 1911, he left the college the majority of his estate, worth some $700,000 at the time. After James's death, Elms continued to serve the college in his capacity as a real estate lawyer and insurance broker until he died in 1932. Elms Henderson had several children. Amongst them were Millicent Henderson Green, born 1882, and Elms Pollock Henderson, born 1885. It's through this next generation that the Trinity connection continues. Elms Pollock Henderson, born 1885, did not attend Trinity College. Instead, he attended UCC and the Royal Military College in Kingston. He enlisted in the Imperial Service in 1906 and became an officer in the 106th Hazara Pioneers, an infantry regiment in the British Indian Army. You can spot Elms Pollock Henderson in the back row on the far right-hand side of this photo. The 106th were in India for most of the First World War, which is where Elms Pollock Henderson met his unfortunate end. With most of the Indian Army deployed overseas in the First World War, the 106th Hazara Pioneers were left behind to defend the northwest frontier, near the border of Afghanistan. On June 25, 1916, Captain Henderson was killed in action on this frontier. He was 30 years old. His final resting place is Delhi Memorial Cemetery in India, but you can see on the right here his memorial plaque, which is in St. James Cathedral here in Toronto. Henderson's personal effects were returned to Canada, including his sword, which he carried into battle. This is his 1897 pattern infantry officer sword, which is a straight blade, three-quarter basket-hilted sword. It was made by Guthrie and Valentine of Cork Street in London. You can see in the top left-hand corner that the guard bears the royal cipher ERI. E stands for Edward VII, the R for Rex, and the I stands for Imperator, which was added to the monarch cipher after Queen Victoria became Empress of India in 1877. The sword is regulation steel, and you might be able to see from the photos that the blade itself is etched with a kind of floral pattern. Before the sword came to the archives, it had one more owner, Elms Patrick Trevelyan Green. Elms Patrick Trevelyan Green was born in 1913, the son of Millicent Henderson Green and Walter Green. In his photographs, I think Green bears a striking resemblance to his uncle, Elms Pollock Henderson. APT Green enrolled in Trinity in 1931, earning a BA in General Arts in 1935. Green was a talented athlete, helping the Trinity football team secure the Mula Cup in 1931. He was also a boxer and skier. When the Second World War began, Green enlisted with the Queen's Own Rifles and became an instructor in skiing and general winter campaign tactics for his unit, which was posted to Iceland. In 1943, he became an officer in the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry and was deployed to Italy. When he went into battle, he carried his uncle's sword with him. Tragically, Captain Green met a similar fate to his uncle. While on active service with the Eighth Army, Green was killed in action on May 1, 1944. Like his uncle, he was only 30 years old. His final resting place is also far from home. Green is buried in the Naples War Cemetery in Italy. The only thing that made it back to Canada was the officer's sword, which was returned to Millicent Henderson Green. It's hard to imagine Millicent Henderson Green's loss, but in her grief, she thought to give something to Trinity. In a letter to Provost Francis Cosgrave, Millicent Henderson Green presented the sword, carried in 2 world wars, first by her brother and then by her son, to Trinity College. In the letter, Henderson Green quotes a line from John Bunyan's book, The Pilgrim's Progress. "My sword I give to him that shall succeed me in my pilgrimage." Mrs. Henderson Green's son was gone, but other sons and daughters of Trinity would carry on in his memory. For many years, the Henderson sword was in the archive silver vault. Last year, a student named Irene Bai was inventorying and cataloging some of the materials in the vault when she came across the sword. Now, Irene happens to be a bit of a sword expert, and she taught Sylvia and I almost everything we would ever need to know about swords. She also stops by every month to care for the sword and give it a fresh coat of Renaissance wax. Irene's care and attention for this artifact has really given it a new life, a new relevance, and I give credit to Irene here today for helping me bring this story to you. Just as the Henderson sword has found renewed life, another remarkable piece of Trinity's heritage has recently come to light, a gift of 4 exquisite tapestry panels crafted from silk and mounted on linen, which just so happen to be the traditional gifts for a 12th anniversary. These panels, rich in history and artistry, carry with them a narrative that stretches across centuries and continents, and their arrival at Trinity brings new understandings to a familial legacy. Donated by the estate of Mark Hutchison, a proud Trinity alum of the class of 42, these panels depict the parable of the prodigal son. It shows the expulsion, repentance, the return, and the feast. The pieces are woven in wool and silk and currently mounted on linen mats. I'm just giving you a closer photo of one of the panels here to give you a sense of the color and the detail because they're really remarkable. The pieces had been in the family of Mark Hutchison, whose maiden name was Payne, and they were framed together in the Hutchison home for many years. Always a point of pride, the Hutchison family reached out to the ROM and the Victoria and Albert Museum in the late 1960s to try to trace the origins of these pieces. The Hutchisons did have some accompanying documents with the panels, notably a letter written by A.W. Cornelius Holland to a cousin, dated April 1884. In the letter, Holland thanked his cousin for loaning him the tapestries, which he felt were ancient and valuable. Holland felt they should be professionally evaluated and suggested sending them to the School of Art in Southampton, UK, for study. He also discussed having the tapestries photographed. Closer to the present day, when experts at the ROM examined the tapestry panels, they attributed them to the late 16th century and felt they were Belgian in origin. Experts at the Victoria and Albert Museum seconded this opinion and in fact had similar pieces in its own collection with additional scenes from the parable, including the prodigal son taking leave of his father, pictured here, and the prodigal son spending his inheritance at the inn. When the panels arrived in the archives in 2016, archivist Sylvia Lassam started to do some research of her own. She turned up a book entitled An Account of the Family of Holland or Holland by none other than A.W. Cornelius Holland, our letter writer from 1884. In the book, a thorough genealogical account of his own family, Holland identifies the tapestry as a family relic, at the time in possession of a relative, one Preston Hallen. A.W. Cornelius reproduces the tapestry panels in the book from the photos he'd had taken and describes the origins of these pieces thusly. Hallen writes that the pieces were brought to England by his ancestor, Cornelius Van Halen, born in Malines, Belgium in 1581. The Van Halens were well known in the weaving guild, and Hallen surmises that the tapestry pieces were likely preserved by the family as a memento, rescued from the sack of Malines in 1572 during the European Wars of Religion. In the early 1600s, Cornelius Van Halen left Belgium for England, bringing the tapestry pieces with him. He settled in Surrey amongst other Dutch Protestant refugees, and the family name was changed from Van Halen to Holland. So, how does a 16th century tapestry end up in Canada? Here's where I did a little sleuthing of my own. I found one member of the Holland family, George Hallen, born in 1794, who studied divinity at Trinity College, Oxford. In 1817, he was ordained as a deacon of the Church of England. In 1835, he and his family moved to Upper Canada, and in 1840, under the auspices of John Strawn, George Hallen was appointed chaplain at the military establishment in Penetanguishene. Later, George and his wife settled in Orillia, Ontario, with their 11 children. One of these children was Preston Holland, likely the same Preston Holland identified as the owner of the tapestries in A.W. Cornelius's book. I suspect Preston gave the tapestries to one of his sisters, Sarah Drinkwater, as the Drinkwater name was shared by Mark Hutchison's paternal grandfather, who also hailed from Orillia. This genealogical digression aside, I was fascinated to find the link between the Holland family and John Strawn. The tapestry pieces are such a lovely gift from a Trinity alumni, but now they also seem like they're woven into the fabric of Trinity itself. And I'm delighted to share that these tapestry panels, treasures that have survived wars, crossed oceans, and been passed down for over 400 years, now have a new home in the Provost's Lodge. Sylvia had them reframed this summer and hung along the second-floor gallery wall. These panels are a living history, a legacy, and now they grace a space where their beauty can be enjoyed every day. And speaking of gifts that mark time, modern gift guides indicate that a watch is a gift to mark one's 15th anniversary because they represent time shared and times to come. I couldn't help but think of a beloved timepiece in Trinity's history, the sundial. The sundial is another gift connected to Gerald Larkin. Records in the archives indicate that in 1941, when Strawn Hall and the men's residence wings were completed, Larkin expressed to Mrs. Elms P. Henderson his wish to place a sundial in the quad. At the time, a sundial designed by Frank Darling was sitting in the garden of his brother, the Reverend Charles Darling, whose property was being sold. Mrs. Henderson, yes, those Hendersons, lived next door, and she helped facilitate the transfer. Larkin inspected the base and approved it, and the Darling family generously donated it to the college. Although the original dial was missing, Mrs. Henderson found a suitable replacement in an antique shop. She also tended to the flower beds around the sundial until at least the mid-1960s. The sundial weathered 3 decades, but eventually began to look worn. Much of the damage to the concrete base was reportedly caused by students. Let's just say the surrounding flowers were often overwatered. Yet it was those same students who led the refurbishment project, dedicating it to honor a beloved Trinity professor, C. Allen Ashley, to recognize his 40 years of service to the college. Spurred on by Peter Hall, students raised $285 towards the sundial replacement, and with additional alumni contributions, the Ashley Sundial Fund grew to over $2,000 by December 1972. Students also contributed significant labor to the project. With Jeff Seaborn taking the lead, the students removed the old concrete base to clear the way for new herringbone brick, planters, and benches. Trinity families chipped in too. A new bronze dial plate was cast by the father of a divinity student, and this completed the restoration. The sundial was rededicated in October 1973, and the unveiling ceremony must have been a sight to behold. I first came across these photos while preparing slideshows for spring reunion. At the time, I half wondered if the young man in the strange getup was part of an elaborate prank, his presence at the microphone simply being humored by Provost Ignatieff. A little digging in the archives revealed the truth. The young man was Paul Orrit, head of college at the time, there to speak on behalf of the students. His unusual attire, his football uniform, only partly hidden beneath academic robes. Orrit had come straight from the Trinity Meds football game happening that same day and even reported the halftime score, 9-0 for the Meds, before delivering a heartfelt speech thanking Professor Ashley for his many years of service to the college. The gift honoring Professor Ashley was given with genuine sincerity, but Trinity students have always had a spirited, sometimes mischievous streak. It wasn't long before the sundial suffered an indignity. Its gnomon, the small indicator that casts the shadow, was snapped off. Although it was replaced at least once, the gnomon proved too tempting a target, and eventually the sundial stood without the ability to tell time. And almost exactly 15 years after the sundial was rededicated, disaster struck in what can only be described as a terrible being on fire incident. During the Trinity College Literary Institute's annual Guy Fawkes celebration, an effigy of Fawkes was hoisted over the sundial and set ablaze. Unfortunately, the evening was damp, and the combination of intense heat from the fire and moisture from the rain caused the sundial's stone base to crack. To make matters worse, a student attempting to stamp out the flames kicked the stone, breaking off a large chunk. Another piece soon followed, leaving the sundial badly damaged. But again, it was students, notably the class of '89, who pushed to raise funds for a replacement. A new base was reportedly installed in 1990, but there was some debate at the time about whether the sundial should remain in its traditional spot at the center of the quad. By 1997, the dial plate had been given to Jeff Seaborn, now the bursar of the college, for safekeeping. Ultimately, the sundial was not included in the extensive quad refurbishment that took place in 2007. The sundial may not have been the most enduring gift, having been replaced twice and ultimately never restored to its original place. Though it is gone from the quad, it is far from forgotten. Alumni visiting the archives often share fond recollections of the sundial, sometimes with a wistful and, yes, occasionally mischievous gleam in their eyes. And at least part of the sundial lives on. The dial plate, entrusted to Jeff Seaborn for safekeeping, now resides in the archives. It is displayed in one of our exhibit cases, where it continues to spark memories and delight visitors. As we move from time to silver, we enter a different kind of story. Silver, the traditional gift for a 25th anniversary, speaks of brilliance and resilience. It's precious, enduring, and often given to celebrate lasting bonds. The silver bowl I want to tell you about carries those meanings, but also a mystery. The Gann Rose Bowl is a lovely item in Trinity's silver collection. It was made in Edinburgh by Brooke and Son, likely in the 1930s. As you can see, it's a pedestaled bowl with a border rim in a Celtic knot pattern and 8 raised ornamentations. It has an inscription reading FG from CSM, followed by Parvum non parve amicitiae pignus, a little token of friendship that is not little. The FG in the inscription is Frank Gann, a Trinity alumni and barrister. The CSM is Charles S. McInnes, pictured here, another prominent barrister. He too was a Trinity alumni. In fact, when Trinity was opened on Hoskin on October 21st, 1925, a special convocation ceremony was held, and C.S. McInnes was given an honorary Doctor of Laws, in part due to his achievements, but also in part due to the fact that he was the grandson of the college's first chancellor, Sir John Beverley Robinson. So the Gann Rose Bowl certainly has a deep connection to Trinity through the original receiver and giver, but this item also has a haunting backstory involving the mysterious and to this day unsolved death of a young Canadian student, Thomas Pattison Moss. Pat Moss, as he was known to his friends, was the only son of John and Christine Millicent Moss, better known as Daisy. His father died of Spanish flu in 1920, but he was doted on by his mother, his Aunt Rose, and Rose's husband, C.S. McInnes. Pat was educated at Trinity College School in Port Hope. When he completed his studies there at the age of 16, he was accepted to Trinity College, but he chose to go to Marlborough College in the UK. He was eventually accepted at Balliol College, Oxford. In May of 1936, Pat was in his third year of study. By all accounts, he was cheerful, well-liked, and had ambitions for a law career in Canada upon completion of his studies. But in the early morning hours of May 15, 1936, his badly burned body was discovered in the ashes of a haystack fire at Ascot Park Farm near Stadhampton, about 10 miles from Oxford. Local police were called to the scene, and at the behest of the boy's uncle, C.S. McInnes, Scotland Yard was also brought on to consult on the case, with Frank Gann serving as McInnes's local man on the ground. At the scene, police found Moss's watch, which had stopped at precisely 2:10 a.m. According to witnesses, Moss had last been spotted in Oxford at 10:50 p.m. the evening before, leaving a 3-hour gap in his whereabouts. Police theorized Moss had been killed in a hit-and-run, with the driver leaving his body in a field and the haystack set ablaze to cover the evidence of the crime. But police didn't turn up any evidence of any kind of accelerant at the scene. A sweep of roads and ditches in the area did not uncover evidence of an accident. Local garages didn't report any damaged cars. Drivers who had been on the road that night were questioned, and all could account for their whereabouts. Interview after interview and lead after lead, police found they simply could not determine how Moss had come to be in the field that night. With foul play all but ruled out, police pronounced the death an accident, and ultimately a jury inquest into Moss's death returned an open verdict. They found that Moss had likely fallen asleep in the field and asphyxiated from the gases produced by a smoldering haystack which had spontaneously combusted. But they also ruled that there was no conclusive evidence to show why or how Moss had come to that field. With the precise circumstances of Moss's death never fully explained, some published histories hold that it was an accident, while others maintain that his death was suspicious and that it could have been murder. All that remains of the Moss mystery is his quiet grave in Northleach Cemetery, a memorial seat in the Fellows' Garden at Oxford, and, of course, the Silver Rose Bowl, which was given to the college in 1965 by Frank Gann, as noted here in the Minutes of Corporation. Also noted was that Pat's mother, Daisy, was told of this donation, and I hope this brought her some comfort. It's a dark story, but the gift shines with light. It reminds us that love can endure loss, and that even in sorrow, there's beauty in coming together to remember. And now, from silver to gold, the traditional gift for a 50th anniversary. Gold speaks of value, permanence, and achievement. Our own yearbook carries that symbolism in its very name. Stephanos, a Greek word meaning crown or laurel, which are often rendered in gold. And it's the Stephanos Yearbook Fond we speak of last, as golden records of student life, preserving friendships, milestones, and memories that might otherwise fade. Stephanos, the Trinity College yearbook, was first produced in 1982 by the students of Trinity College and included textual and photographic material contributed by members of the community. The goal of the yearbook was, in the words of its first editor, Martin Guest, to convey a fraction of the charm and sparkle of Trinity, to spark remembrances that might escape normal recollection, and to motivate all students to re-illuminate the college. Stephanos was published up until the 2018-2019 academic school year, but stopped during the pandemic, although I have heard there are students who are interested in starting it up again. The archives holds a full set of these yearbooks, and they're often the first things students want to see when they come in. Sometimes it's because they have a parent or sibling who went to Trin and they want to look up an old embarrassing photo. But more often than not, it's the most accessible way to get to know the college and to understand its past from a student perspective. Turn a page and you can find out what Trin has been like over the years, what its traditions are, what saints and conversat were like, or the Lit, or the Trinity College Dramatic Society. Stephanos connects students to the college's history, and it reminds them that they're a part of that story too. Not only do we have the published yearbooks, but we also have photos and textual records related to the making of Stephanos. We have the things that didn't make it in, the more unvarnished bits of the past. And I think that it's important for students to see that as well. I once worked with a student who was going through old photographs to put together an exhibit. At one point, she sighed and said, "Why does it seem like people in the past had more fun?" Being a designated old, I answered, "I'm not sure they did. I think we're just seeing the photographs that they kept because it seems like everybody in them is having fun." The Stephanos Vault is full of photographs of people having fun, sure, but we also have photographs of people looking kind of bored or silly or lost. It's like the Halleck Diaries, I think. Maybe you see yourself in the yearbook, but you see yourself even more in the mundane parts, the parts where you think no one is looking, the awkward space when you're somewhere between the kid that you were and the adult you'll become. It's a brief time, and if you don't write it down or take a picture, you might not remember it later. I wanted to end where we began, with student records, because they are among the most meaningful gifts in our archives. Whether it's a diary, a yearbook, or a stack of photos, each record captures a moment in time, a life lived within Trinity's walls. These records remind us that history isn't abstract, it's personal. They allow future generations to trace their roots, rediscover forgotten stories, and feel the continuity of this community. Gifts can come in many forms: paper, glass, wood, steel, silver, and gold. But beyond the material, the true gift is memory, the stories we preserve, and the connections they keep alive. Ultimately, that's what endures. So thanks everyone for coming today. I believe we have some time for Q&A now. If you have any questions about what you've just heard or any questions about the archives in general, I'll open the floor, and Braden, you're going to moderate, right? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that, Lindsay.
That's okay.
Thanks so much. Lindsay, it was amazing, and thank you everyone for joining. So I do have a question here, and just a reminder for folks, there is the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen if you do have a question. But the first question I have is, many of the artifacts you've shared reflect different eras of Trinity's identity. How do you see these gifts continuing to shape the college's sense of community and tradition today?
Oh, I mean, I think the example of the Henderson sword kind of represents how these artifacts shape the community today. When Irene was working in the Silver Vault, there was actually like a whole troop of students, and we all went down together. And actually, there's not one sword, there's two. So it was just, a bunch of young people really excited about swords. So I think there's something in those moments, right? Like experiencing Trinity's past, but then feeling like that's part of your present too. So I think that's probably how they'll continue to shape Trinity. I think there are also possibilities for some of the artifacts that I talked about. I mean, there's the windows in Strawn Hall, and I think it would be really interesting if somebody, picked that up again and sort of, you know, carried out that proposal maybe, and sort of continued to sort of shape Trinity College in that way.
Amazing. Yeah, it would be really great to see some of those things
It would be so
get flight.
cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I've seen the sword. The swords are very fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, we have a question from Gordon B. He asked, "Can we visit the archives and ask questions?"
Hi, Gordon. Yes, absolutely. We're open 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You can drop in, so appointments are sort of, it's by chance, or you can make an appointment. And I love it when people visit. I'm on the lower level of Trin proper, so I'm here at 6 Hoskin Avenue, and it's always great to have visitors.
Another question here for you, Lindsay. In your work as archivist, what discovery or story has most surprised you or moved you while researching these artifacts?
I think it's got to be the sundial story. I mean, I really came to it through these photographs that I found for reunion, and I when I was looking at them, I was like, "What is going on here?" Like it sort of looks like, like a 70s sort of comedy, like a college comedy. I was like, I have no idea what's going on here. But then finding out the story behind it, and we actually have Paul Orit's speech in the archives. I didn't have time to share it today, but it was really heartfelt. Like they were thanking Professor Ashley for 40 years of service to the college. He was a beloved Trinity professor. He lived at the college. He was a professor of commerce, and he contributed so much to the life of the college. Just sort of small and large contributions that he made every day, and seeing the students acknowledge that was really quite touching. And also seeing how everybody kind of came together to put something together for him, that was also really, that was quite touching.
And I have one final question. So looking ahead, what types of items or traditions do you think future generations will look back on as enduring gifts of our time?
That is a great question. I think that with intervention, digital records can be the enduring records. And one thing that I would love to see in particular, especially with student records, is I would love to see students sending me like TikToks and things like that, and like short form video, because I think that's such a form of this time, and I feel like they're very ephemeral, but I would love to find a way to sort of capture those, because we have so many other ephemeral student materials in the archives, and I think there's probably a way to do it. I think those will probably be what we look back on and we go, oh yeah, like that's the 2020s, all right, like short form video.
That would be really interesting to have a mini digital archive.
Yeah.
That would be super fascinating. I have a final question here from Patricia Bates, who asked, what items would you like to receive from alumni?
Oh, that is a great question. I think anything that you want to share with us. I mean, I think especially photographs are great. And if you know the names of the people in the photographs, especially, that's really important. Being able to have that sort of name access. Um, we get a lot of things like blazers, we get a lot of pins. I mean, if people have diaries, or, if there are younger alumni who have sort of social media posts or things like that that they've kind of preserved from their time at Trinity, um, I feel like a lot of that is kind of missing. We don't really have this documentation of like the early 21st century that we do with perhaps, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. Um, but yeah, definitely photographs are wonderful. Written records like diaries. Um, yeah, yeah. I think anything that you're sort of willing to share with us too, and we can have a conversation about it.
Well, Lindsay, I think that is the last of our questions. So I'd just like to thank you on behalf of the Alumni Affairs Office for giving your talk today. And if you have any final words, feel free.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, so much for coming. It was a really I had a lot of fun putting this presentation together, and I'm really happy to see so many folks out. It's really nice.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. And thanks so much, everyone, for attending. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you soon.